Good afternoon. Boa tarde a todos. I'm Jason Marza, Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Adrian Arsht Latin America Center. And don't worry, the rest of this event will be in English rather than Portuguese. I want to welcome you first to today's readout on Friday's Biden and Lula meeting right here in Washington, D.C. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome a really distinguished group of experts from the U.S. And from Brazil, who I will introduce momentarily. But just to first a little bit of context first. Last Friday's meeting between President Biden and President Lula happened at an incredibly important juncture for U.S.-Brazil relations. Lula traveled to D.C. just over a month after his inauguration and just over a month after the attacks on buildings in Brasilia representing the three branches of government. Following Lula's trip to Argentina and Uruguay and a visit by the Chancellor of Germany, Lula had a quick one-day trip here to Washington. Amid this backdrop of domestic democratic consolidation and growing outreach abroad, Lula came to Washington with environmental, economic, democratic, and diplomatic priorities in mind. And President Biden welcomed him with an eye toward the broader global importance of the Lula presidency and the importance of strong U.S. support for an incredibly critical ally. Lula and Biden hammered out key points of bilateral agreement. And now we have months of looking ahead to implementation. That'll be the focus of our conversation today. Those points include cooperation on the environmental protection front, including potential U.S. support to the Amazon front, geopolitical alignment, such as around restructuring of the UN Security Council, and continuing to support domestic resilience at home and abroad. So to dive deeper into the outcomes of this visit and the next steps for U.S.-Brazil relations, I'm thrilled to welcome this conversation a number of experts, beginning with one of the most knowledgeable people on Brazil and the bilateral relationship, Ricardo Zuniga. Ricardo is the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary and the Special Envoy for the Northern Triangle of the State Department's Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs. Among his previous positions, he served as the U.S. Consul General in Sao Paulo, and I know through great 4th of July parties as Consul General there in Sao Paulo. Following this conversation with Ricardo, my colleague Valentina Sater, who leads our Brazil work, will moderate a conversation with experts in Brazil on the next step following President Lula's visit to Washington. We'll be joined by Abrão Neto, the CEO of AmCham Brazil, and I'm proud to say a longstanding non-resident senior fellow of the Atlantic Council, Fernanda Magnota, who's a columnist for international politics at UAL and a professor of international relations at FAEP in Sao Paulo, and Frinalda Rezende, who's the executive director of the Nature Conservancy in Brazil. So a reminder to our audience, feel free to utilize the Q&A function in Zoom and follow the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag ACBrazil. So Ricardo, I'll start off with you with a broader question, which will demand a longer response than the response to the other questions. But we've been closely, of course, tracking President Lula's first official meeting to Washington last week. From your perspective, which objectives were accomplished, and then also what's still on the table?
Jason, first of all, thanks so much for the invitation to participate. You've got a great panel ahead as well, some of the most knowledgeable people I know, and great colleagues and friends. So congratulations for putting together a great panel. So first and foremost, this is a massive relationship. It's a relationship that extends far beyond governments. It's really about societies and economies. And it really is the relationship between the two largest democracies in the region and democracies that are going through similar strains. And the most important thing that we wanted to do in this first meeting between our leaders was set the stage for progress at very senior levels over the coming year and establish a good rapport between two leaders who value that. And we accomplished that. The meeting that was supposed to be 45 minutes went 2 hours. We were not surprised by that because our governments have significant equities in the current global environment, particularly around climate change and international peace, but also areas related to food insecurity and the international governance system, particularly what we can do together, not just at the UN, but through the G20 as well, where we expect to have a very active exchange. What we did with this initial meeting was get the green light from leaders to proceed down an ambitious agenda that relates to the major issues of the day: democratic erosion, working together to promote development, not just bilaterally, but in the Americas as well. That's a crucial piece of our collaboration. And then, of course, to set the stage for important negotiations related to climate change and how we can work together to attend to issues related to the environment and in the Amazon basin. Again, on a multilateral level, not just bilaterally. So what we've done now is set the table for a very significant amount of work for our leaders to continue to endorse at the cabinet level and at the senior leader level, beginning almost immediately. As I've been saying, we will respect Carnival, but after that, expect a torrent of visitors from the United States.
As someone is serving in Sao Paulo, you understand the importance of respecting Carnival. One thing I saw, Ricardo, at least in the public comments, as you said, was the incredibly good rapport between President Biden and President Lula. And also important to highlight the fact that it's rare that a president from Latin America comes to Washington so quickly and that person's presidency. I mean, coming 5 weeks afterwards is just it's unheard of, frankly, and it shows the real importance of the relationship. You mentioned a couple important points, but really, above all, the green light for moving forward on the priorities that were discussed. From your perspective, what are the top priorities, and what can be moved forward? What should be moved forward first among those priorities?
Look, I think environmental collaboration and our work together on the multilateral initiative in South America that Brazil seeks to organize, I think that's going to be an important area, because I think as President Lula has rightly pointed out, the Amazon is crucial in this, but that's not the only environmental question in the region. We certainly want to join with others in the region and to do this as a group. And we believe that there's enormous power in that approach. I think I just also wanted to emphasize, it was not lost on the United States that we were the first stop outside of the region for President Lula. We appreciated that. We wanted to reciprocate that level of respect. And certainly we sought since the beginning of his administration to demonstrate not just our readiness, but our eagerness to work with Brazil as a major multilateral partner. So that's another important topic in our relationship. How can we work together on a global level in Africa, again, in multilateral institutions, and on the major security issues of the day? And security meaning also the well-being of people and how that affects the security of societies. So food insecurity, working together in multilateral banks to the extent that we possibly can to make these sort of agile vehicles for dealing with the biggest problem we face, which is none of us has the budget to actually deal with the profound problems that societies face, given the scale of inflation, the disruption caused by the war in the Ukraine, and the lingering effects of the pandemic.
Ricardo, two points that you raised, I want to drill down a little bit further on. One is you mentioned Amazon climate. One of the outputs from that meeting is the potential of the U.S. joining the Amazon Fund. So from your perspective, do you see that as happening? And also, do you think we have Lula and Biden potentially working together on negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, given the expressed interest of Lula, and you mentioned this as well, on working on broader global priorities, and frankly, how he and his previous presidencies worked to try to resolve some of the bigger global issues?
Well, clearly, Brazil has a long history of being a global protagonist. I mean, you mentioned our work together on the Amazon Fund. Brazil, of course, is a major international protagonist in the climate conversation, as well as being a primary actor in terms of dealing with deforestation and dealing with the issues of the Amazon. So we certainly are looking for the best way to be collaborative there, and we set the stage for that in this conversation. It was a topic of significant discussion between the leaders and between our cabinets. I think I should also point out that we wanted to reciprocate this level of interest in the Brazilian side by having most of the leadership of our cabinet included in this meeting. So we had Secretary Blinken, Secretary Austin, we had Secretary Holland, Jake Sullivan, Ambassador Frawley Bagley, of course, and former Secretary Kerry, as well as Senator Dodd in his role as a senior advisor to the President for the Americas. And we saw that there was a lot in all of those areas, and in the energy relationship as well. We see ample room for collaboration, and we certainly understand that we're going to have different perspectives, but we saw a tremendous amount of alignment as well on where we want to land.
It's very important. I would assume that many of those cabinet level participants are now probably itching to get down to Brazil and do some of the follow-up from the discussion with the president.
Absolutely. And so we anticipate that those engagements will begin quite soon and carry on through at least the first half of the year is when we anticipate having a significant amount of engagement. I missed one important point, which is that they talked so much about democracy and what that means in terms of involving all of our societies. So the fact that Brazil led with a strong conversation related to diversity and dealing with those who are excluded across the region and not just in Brazil is very important. We talked about the very significant challenges that our democratic societies and our democratic cultures face under the present circumstances. So that is also going to be a core part of our bilateral discussion and relationship.
Absolutely fundamental, Ricardo. Now, President Biden told President Lula during the meeting that, quote, both of our nation's strong democracies have been tested of late, end quote, but democracy prevailed. As you were just mentioning with regard to democracy in the upcoming end of March, the U.S. will co-host with a number of other countries the second Summit for Democracy. From your perspective, what unique insights on democracy could the Brazilian delegation bring to this summit, both for the U.S. but also for other global partners as part of this conference?
Well, I think it's really important that the perspective of this administration, and certainly Secretary Blinken has led with this in the Americas, is that our goal is to make sure that citizens of the region feel that democracy works for them. That's really what we need to see accomplished. There's no competition between democracy and an authoritarian model. There's no one who's actively pursuing or wants to see an authoritarian model prevail in the Americas, but there's also huge dissatisfaction with the benefits that democracy and the ability of governments to deliver on the expectations of the population. We are very focused on ensuring that democracy is working in favor of the whole of society and not just parts of it. And for us, the fact that Brazil has a dramatic example of how that was accomplished early in this century in terms of moving people out of poverty using democracy and markets is, for us, a model that is very significant for the Americas, for other parts of the world, and making those two pieces, that tension that often exists between market-based economies and ensuring that everyone in society is carried along by economic growth, is really one of our most important tasks that we can undertake together, is finding a way to ensure, number one, that people are able to pursue opportunity and that they are able to use the markets to not just improve their own lives, but improve the lives of others, but to do so in a way that reaches as far into society as we possibly can. Because I think one of the biggest factors in instability across the region is those left outside of that progress.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. That people see that democracies are not delivering, or there's at least a perception that democracies aren't delivering, and we need to show that democracies can deliver, and that democracy is the best form of government for actually delivering to the people what is most needed and necessary. And as you mentioned, Brazil has a number of examples of that from President Lula's previous terms in office. When Lula was here, he also met with a number of prominent progressive lawmakers. In addition to President Biden, he also went over to the AFL-CIO. What are some of the unique issue areas that you see as opportunities for our Congress and the Brazilian lawmakers to be able to tackle together?
So if we're talking about operating with limited fiscal capacity, limited fiscal space to deal with to meet the aspirations of our citizens, we need our legislatures, our respective legislatures, to be a part of this conversation. And not just to make resources available, but to be a part of the formulation of ideas that actually, again, reach citizens. And so in Brazil, we're very aware that the legislature is increasingly important in terms of being an actor in trying to drive the national agenda. The United States Congress obviously is very much a partner, is an equal branch of government, and therefore an equal player in terms of ensuring that these solutions reach beyond our shores, and that our close partners like Brazil are also beneficiaries of kind of a broad range of innovations and improvements in terms of these deliveries of services. This requires dealing with very hard political issues, and resource issues are among the most difficult that our legislatures deal with. We think it's really critically important that there be a strong sharing of ideas about how we are able to have economies that succeed, societies that succeed, and international communities that are safe and that preserve space for democracies, because ultimately that is one of the greatest things that we share in our relationship, which is a shared vision that the future should also be democratic, not just the past. That's not something that we throw around lightly in a world where democracy is under strain.
Excellent points. And given the importance of the relationship, strong bipartisan or nonpartisan visits to Brazil, Brazilian lawmakers to the United States is going to be absolutely fundamental insofar as the next stages of the relationship and moving forward this incredibly robust agenda that I think, Ricardo, we haven't had an agenda this robust on U.S.-Brazil relations, especially so early in the presidency in quite some time. I want to end with one last question to you, which is the fact that President Biden accepted President Lula's invitation to visit Brazil by 2024, which is absolutely excellent. And that's the year when the two countries will, of course, celebrate 200 years of our bilateral relationship. We're incredibly important allies, but that also presents an additional window of opportunity to move forward on many of the issues that were discussed last Friday. From your perspective, what is most important to accomplish between now and when President Biden goes to Brazil?
We have to see progress in the climate space, for sure. Not just in terms of the Amazon Fund and the work that's being done in the Amazon Basin by Brazil and other partners, but on the multilateral level as well. We need to increase our collaboration so that we are using our relationships and our protagonism at the international level to bring along other countries that may not seem as committed to ensuring that we achieve our overall global climate goals. And so this is a space where we need to work together and use these other areas of global governance to achieve that. That's one. In terms of setting the stage for a sustained investment in social development across the Americas, that's another important one. And certainly in the area of democracy, we need to do what we can to reinforce democratic culture and democratic institutions bilaterally, working with each other. And one important way to do that is by dealing with issues like racism, discrimination, exclusion, but also in terms of making sure that economies and that market economies are available to all in society so that we can all see broad-based improvement. These are all areas where we think there's going to be important work. Certainly in the economic realm, we are exploring what else we can do to facilitate trade in this vital $100 billion relationship, but that is still not performing at the level that it could. And so these are all areas we think are really going to be vital.
Absolutely fundamental in areas in which, as you know, you can count on the Atlantic Council, whether it's climate issues, whether it's trade and investment, other key issues to be a partner. And we're so lucky to have your leadership, those across the State Department, the White House, across USG, Congress, and of course, a great Ambassador Elizabeth Bagley in Brazil as well to move forward this relationship. So, Ricardo, thank you so much for joining us today. Look forward to the follow-up. And I will now going to turn it over to Valentina Sadar to moderate the second half of our conversation.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ricardo. This was a great first part of this conversation, and now I would like to welcome Abreu Neto, Fernanda Manhota, and Frineia Rezende, so we can continue on to this conversation and look into the Brazilian perspective actually. We heard from Ricardo, Fernanda, on the U.S. perspective of the meeting between President Lula and President Biden on Friday, but how are Brazilians seeing the outcomes of the bilateral meeting and of the trip overall?
Hello, Valentina. Hello, everybody. It's a huge pleasure to be back here to an Atlantic Council event, and it's a huge pleasure to be with Mr. Zuniga once more. We miss him a lot here in Sao Paulo, and it's very nice to have the chance to be with Abrão and Frinea as well. So, Valentina, I think in general, the repercussion of the bilateral meeting was very positive in Brazil. As predicted, we know it was more an opportunity for closer ties between the two leaders than necessarily a working meeting for audacious announcement. It was not that. I would say that among the main convergences, two stand out. The first one, of course, the defense of the democracy, and then the environmental issue. Among the most sensitive topics, of course, are building peace and guaranteeing international stability, especially concerning Ukraine. In Brazil, we have an apparent notion that containment of threats to democratic institutions in this century will depend on transnational articulation. So the cooperation between Brazil and the US is fundamental in this regard. Extremism, hate speech, misinformation, political violence are common problems that we are facing in both countries. So it should be addressed together. The same happens in the environment. So it is a subject with countless opportunities for exchange and dialogue. The resumption of the Brazil-US high-level working group on climate change that was created in 2015 and is coming back now was good news. It was a good outcome. Also, signaling the remittance of resources to the Amazon Fund, that was Red mentioned, was good news too. However, I need to tell you that it is essential to say that the disclosed amounts that were announced, even informally, they frustrated many members of the Brazilian government who expected a more significant amount of resources. And at least to end this very brief summary, regarding Ukraine, it was possible to know the difficulty that we have of consensus. So everything indicates that Lula had little space to talk about his proposal of a peace club, as we are referring here in Brazil. And in addition, in the document released at the end of the meeting, we can say that there was a symbolic victory for the US diplomacy, since the text was very emphatic regarding the attribution of blame to Russia for the conflict, something that Brazil had already formally recognized, but that President Lula always tends to treat in a very ambiguous way and with some hesitation. So in summary, we have the prospect of good relations, but with occasional setbacks.
I think that was a great recap, Fer. Thank you so much for that. And honestly, like Ricardo was mentioning, and as you mentioned too, the environment was the big star of this trip, with both Minister Marina Silva and Special Envoy John Kerry also joining President Biden and President Lula during this meeting. Frinea, I wanted to turn it to you from the Nature Conservancy. President Lula has long signaled that Brazil's foreign policy during his administration would have a climate policy focus, which is also a priority of President Biden. What are some avenues for concrete action and collaboration on this front? They obviously talked and mentioned this intention of resuming the United States-Brazil Climate Change Working Group, like Fernanda mentioned, but also this potential U.S. contribution to the Amazon Fund. Ricardo also mentioned some objectives in terms of the multilateral front and how you can have this relationship moving forward there in that realm. So what are some action-oriented steps that we can take and see coming from this bilateral conversation?
Thank you, Valentina, and also Atlantic Council team for this invitation and amazing opportunity to discuss this issue with you. So actually, in addition to this injection of financial resources that we're talking about, the elaboration of international policy, definitely bilateral agreements that guarantee the continuity of U.S. supporting Amazon biome mailing in long terms. this path would be probably the most important for us to reach some important outcomes in terms of conserving and protecting Amazon, and definitely having outcomes regarding climate change. So we want to have an impact if you are talking about short term. So for instance, talking about 10 years of improvement in Amazon fund would be enough to solve all issues that you have, all issues that you are facing in Amazon. For instance, if you look to Pará state, one of the largest states that we have in Brazil, only this state in Amazon is the same size of the southeast area in Brazil. I mean, if you add state of Minas Gerais, state of São Paulo, state of Rio de Janeiro, and the state of Espírito Santo, if anyone try to reach the Google Map, for instance, you can see the same size of these 4 states is the size of Pará. So we are talking about complex issues. So you need to enhance our bilateral agreements to solve those issues. There are a lot of issues that we can have solutions by agreeing with US and other countries as well, but mostly we need to forest our agreements in those issues. So ensure that we are including negotiations on foreign trade terms, for instance. Ensure that US demands products from clean value chains. Also prioritizing the engagement agenda of private sector or even the financial sector in the US, which can finance companies that have activities that present serious issues regarding the value chain. So there are some paths, some concrete actions in terms of collaboration between US and Brazil that we can see today in short term. But again, we need to enhance that US, you collaborate in terms of resources, financial resources, economical resources, so we can solve the Amazon and climate change issues.
Thank you, Frineia. And I think that one of the points that you mentioned was the importance of the private sector in this climate, in establishing more ambitious climate goals. Although the Lula-Biden meeting largely focused on the environment and democracy, trade and investment remain a key part of the bilateral relationship. Abrão, how can the Brazilian and US private sector leverage this interest in a green economic transition to actually advance bilateral economic cooperation?
Hello, Valentina. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to participate once again in the Atlantic Council's dialogues, and it's always great to listen to Ricardo Zuniga, very knowledgeable about Brazil and of course about the United States. But turning to your question, well, I guess that a successful transition to green economy obviously requires large amounts in investment, or large amounts of investment in developing and adopting new technologies, in changing to cleaner and renewable sources of energy, and in transforming production processes. So there is a relevant economic dimension in such a transition. I may almost say that they are two sides of the same coin. So in this sense, if there is a strong bilateral interest in climate change, in the environment, and in energy transition, this interest will naturally spill over to economic cooperation. I believe that the environment is going to be the backbone for the bilateral relationship in the next years, including the economic and the commercial dimensions of this relationship. And there are many opportunities in areas as bioeconomy, renewable energy, green infrastructure, waste management, among others. And we also may cooperate in many forms. We may exchange regulatory experiences and technical cooperation in advanced biofuels, in sustainable aviation fuel, in green hydrogen. I mean, there are many areas that we may explore how cooperate in a technical way, in R&D and innovation. And also, I believe there is room for fostering more investments in sustainable related projects including by means of enhancing the presence and the involvement of US and Brazil agencies that support investment and development, such as the DFC and the USTDA in the United States and the BNDES here in Brazil. So just in a nutshell, I guess if the private sector support actions in this direction, we will see the environmental conversation very close and generating opportunities, economic opportunities for both countries.
I think that's perfect. And I agree with you that climate seems to be the backbone of the bilateral relations from now on, but we cannot let trade and investment stay behind. And in the coming year, Brazil will also preside over the G20. So there is an important momentum there for Brazil to take on a global leadership role. As President Lula works to bring Brazil to the center of international affairs, how could we see he leveraged U.S.-Brazil relations into these objectives? In what ways can Brazil be an even more strategic partner for the United States, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean? And Fernanda, I wanted to ask you that question.
Yes, sure, Vali. Well, I think there are at least 3 areas where the Brazilian government can invest in boosting relations with the U.S. These are areas where there are lots of opportunities for bilateral engagement. As Abrão was saying, trade and investment is the first one. The second one, of course, is environment that we are discussing here already. And the third one that is very important and is strategic as well, I would say, is defense. So these are the subjects in which we have windows of opportunity. But in addition to all this, there is something fundamental in my perspective that I would like to highlight. It is necessary to reinforce an agenda focused on increasing dialogue between different levels of government and institutions. And this is the reality because relations between Brazil and the US are very complex. So they cannot and should not be done only based on dialogue between the 2 federal governments, on my perspective. So in this sense, Brazil should find way to expand the capillarity of institutions defending national interests in the city, in DC, in Washington in general, such as, for example, I would mention some of them. The first one, the Congresses of both countries, they have lots of opportunities to collaborate. So with political reinforcement in the Brazilian caucus in DC, for example, and the joint Brazil-US Commission in Brasilia. I would also mention as key stakeholders, the states and some municipalities that can use mechanisms of subnational diplomacy that could be very relevant for the bilateral cooperation. Of course, Abrão is here, but I would also mention the business community, such as through Brazil-US Business Council, Brazil-US CEO Forum, and the Chambers of Commerce in both countries. Also the think tanks and the epistemic communities that can be very relevant. And last but not least, I would mention the importance of paying attention to the Brazilian diaspora in the US, because there is a window of opportunity here too. The expatriate community could be very useful to negotiating and bargaining and who knows, even lobbying for the Brazilian interests as well. So besides the subjects themselves, I think the way we foster the strategy and the way we negotiate our interests, it has to be more spread out.
One of the points that we've been coming back to is also in terms of the Amazon Fund. President Biden stated that he will work with Congress to fund the protection of the Amazon rainforest, including initial support for the Amazon Fund, then joining Norway and Germany, who already contribute to this fund. Frinea, how does the Amazon Fund help protect the Amazon rainforest while also fostering the sustainable development of the region? We were just talking about who had visited the Amazon before, but like how does the Amazon Fund actually help to achieve those two goals? And how will the US's pledge impact other countries' considerations and intentions of whether to join in on this effort or not?
Interesting. Protecting the Amazon today represents actually one of the main solutions to reduce the threats that we are facing regarding climate change on the globe. So one country investment cannot be interpreted and I would not believe that we will, as a competition between different countries. So our nations today, they need to tackle the problem in a serious way. So in a collaborative way as well. So by joining the Amazon Fund, US could actually contribute more for the impact that we need to have in Amazon, in terms of Amazon. So if you think strategically, the greater resources that you invest in the fund, the greater the positive impact that you can deliver the region or the biome and the rainforest, and of course tackling serious climate change. And back to the sustainable development, I believe that Brazil is really aware about the major problem related to deforestation here. So, for instance, today we know that mainly the low-income population is related to deforestation and illegal activities in Amazon. Not only in Brazil, but I'm talking about Amazon as a biome. So I'm talking about other countries in this scenario. So both Lula and Marina Silva, President Lula and Marina Silva, our new environment minister, they are really committed to accelerate solutions to make sustainable activities possible in Amazon and other countries as well, as I know. But we know we are talking about this Amazon Fund regarding Brazil. So mainly linked to bioeconomy. Today, Marina Silva is enhancing this argument, talking about how can we enhance and leverage bioeconomy. And we are talking about a kind of economy, bioeconomy, regarding what we're calling social biodiversity here in Brazil, which means when you are talking about the species, for instance, that you find in Amazon, not only açaí, the Brazilian berry that almost everyone knows today, castanha do Brasil, which is Brazilian nuts, or even cocoa or cacao. So we have among other species that you could explore in a sustainable way, of course, to enhance bioeconomy. So this is what you are calling social biodiversity. And also, when you are working in this path, you are bringing together diversity, and you are talking about what we call as well IPLC, Indigenous People and Local Communities. So this agenda is quite prioritized for Marina Silva and now, of course, Lula. And today we have, for instance, a new ministry regarding Indigenous people in Brazil. It's quite new. It's a brand new ministry. So since COP27, by the way, President Lula has been emphasizing the climate agenda as essential for the country. Regarding this development, including assuming of committed to zero deforestation by 2030. And for instance, TNC and many other institutions as well are committed with this goal. And within the US, for instance, we could enhance this approach from developing countries. We can reach those goals beyond bringing diversity, beyond leverage climate change, tackling climate change as well. And I would say that we need to think more strategically regarding this relationship with US and how the United States and the Congress itself could enhance and help the Amazon Fund to be more strategic in terms of not competing and on bringing more advanced discussions with Norway and Germany as well. Not only those two countries, but other countries that could be join this amazing fund that we have already operating for many years So there are a lot of learnings from what have been done by Amazon Fund that you need to enhance.
That sounds perfect. So there is definitely an avenue for greater cooperation on this front and to improve the way that this fund has been working and make sure that we are working also not only with the federal government, but also with the legislative and local governments too. Abreu, one of the things that we've been talking and looking beyond the environment also is that this trip did not have a private sector focus, but that the United States is Brazil's second largest trading partner and among Brazil's top foreign investors. I know that AmCham has proposed advancements on the climate front as a potential catalyst to a stronger US-Brazil economic partnership. How do you see this new shift in this potential collaboration on the climate front actually helping advance current and new opportunities for foreign investment, particularly in the United States? How do we foster this trade and investment relations even further? Like Ricardo mentioned, they are still not at their potential.
Yeah, well, I'm also going to take Ricardo Zuniga's cue here. And definitely Brazil and the United States have a very substantial trade and economic relationship. We have an annual flow of more than 100 billion in trade of goods and services. We have a stock of 200 billion in mutual investment, but there is much more than that we can accomplish. And I believe there are some measures that would help expand our bilateral trade and investment. And of course, all of the discussion around the environment will bring economic opportunities, will perhaps open the doors for more investment in these areas. But also for this to take place, there are some issues that have been in our bilateral agenda for some time now that we may address and would help us to move forward. So I could mention first and foremost the importance of negotiating a long overdue double taxation agreement. This is essential for fostering investment and for our bilateral trade in services and goods. I guess there is the possibility of bringing new chapters to our recently agreed mini trade deal or ATEC protocol, to be more technical. And we may work on some non-tariff issues, including digital trade, which was something that both governments have already started doing and may take advantage of the work that have been done so far. We have many things to do in terms of facilitating and streamlining our exports and imports of goods. We have a mutual recognition agreement on trusted traders that needs to be concluded. We have the opportunity of implementing the trade facilitation chapter of the ATEC protocol, which is already in force. And we have also the opportunity of strengthening the bilateral dialogues that we already have between Brazil and the United States. Fernanda mentioned the CEO Forum. We have also the commercial dialogue. We have the energy forum. We have the clean energy industry dialogue, which is was created very recently. We have the defense industry dialogue. So all of these areas may bring economic opportunities which walk hand in hand with the doors that are being opened in the environmental and climate discussion.
Abreu, you already answered a little bit of my next question that I was going to pose to all of you, so we can wrap. But based on the outcomes of this visit and with the expectation of U.S. officials visiting Brazil in the upcoming months, what is one policy aspect of the U.S.-Brazil relationship that you will watch? And I feel like you mentioned a few, but is there one that you would be watching further and that you're going to be covering the most?
Well, I'm very interested in watching what are the concrete opportunities that will arise from this intersection between environment and investment or environment and economy. I mean, the conversation and the agreement, the convergence that was clear between the two presidents will now put will allow both administrations to work more concretely in these areas. And I'm very much interested in seeing what we will be seeing in terms of advancement in our bilateral relationship.
So am I. And I think that this opens up an opportunity for a lot to be done on the trade and investment front too, and for the private sector and governments to be creative in terms of how we go about that. Fernanda, next is you. What's one policy proposal that you're following and that you will continue to follow now after this meeting?
So that's a very good question. I would say that I'll pay attention on how the two countries see the construction of international stability. Because if before the United States was already a little bit uncomfortable with Brazil's neutrality profile regarding, for example, the conflict in Europe, for example, or even the diversification of our partners around the world, now with the new government here, it will have to deal with an administration that adds a new ingredient to this receipt, which is the search of for leadership. So this new approach could generate tensions involving third countries, especially China and Russia. I see here Professor Barbara Stallings at our audience, which is a very great expert in China and US, China, Latin America. So how the diplomacy of Brazil and the US will navigate through this diplomatic relations in a crucial point. It is a crucial point to define the quality of the commitments between the two countries in the next year. Geopolitics, Valley.
Geopolitics, we're all watching it here from the Atlantic Council too. Frinea, on your side, I'm hoping it's going to be a climate policy.
Definitely. Definitely is. Actually, we need to wait for what the US you define as a amount of money, amount of resources that you, if the bill will pass or not at the Congress, because you depend on the Congress definition. So definitely that this kind of thing. But also, I know you said just one, but I'd like to add something else regarding what Abraham said before, because you know that, for instance, North American companies, they need to follow some logic of banning products from historically problematic chains. So it would be great to watch, to see what the Congress you do regarding this kind of problem. So they will define a new bill regarding these, because they have the power to create strategies to avoid products with problematic value chains in Amazon. So it would be great if they could link this kind of a strategy or approach with as well enhance the Amazon fund, definitely.
Well, with that, on that note, I would like to thank our experts today, Ricardo Zuniga earlier, Abreu Neto, Fernanda Manhota, Frinea Rezende, for joining us today and sharing their insights. This is an important moment for US-Brazil relations, and we are excited to what can be accomplished jointly. Thank you for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.